Spider-Man: Homecoming is directed by John Watts, and it stars Tom Holland, Robert Downey Jr., and Michael Keaton, just to name a few. And here to talk with me about it is Anthony from the SilverScreen Analysis. Anthony, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to us once again?
What's up, guys? I'm Anthony with the SilverScreen Analysis. I have a movie review channel just like this one here, so I'm excited to talk about Spider-Man: Homecoming and get into some spoilers and talk about it.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a spoiler review, so if you guys haven't seen the movie yet, definitely go see it. It is definitely worth watching. So yeah, we're going to go into depth into this movie. Spider-Man: Homecoming takes place roughly a couple months after the events of Captain America: Civil War, and Peter Parker is trying to prove himself to Tony Stark. He's trying to become an Avenger pretty much, and he's pretty much told to just stay low, just deal with the small crimes, and kind of a protective thing for Tony Stark to do for him. And while he's trying to stay low, he discovers that there's some shady stuff going on with Michael Keaton, who ends up playing the Vulture later on. Him and his gang kind of were kicked out of this construction gig for picking up after the Avengers battle in the first Avengers movie, so he's kind of pissed about that. And he goes on this rampage of just stealing all this high technology, alien weaponry, and he's selling this stuff on the black market to some shady people. And Peter Parker kind of stumbles upon that, and he uses this opportunity to pretty much prove himself to Tony Stark to be an Avenger. So yeah, Anthony, what did you think of this movie? What are your opening thoughts?
Opening thoughts overall, I had a great time with this movie. I had high expectations, and I think it met my expectations. I really enjoyed what this story did. It was kind of like an origin story, and it was sort of mixed with a coming-of-age story for Peter Parker, but it wasn't that same origin story that we've always gotten with, a normal kid gets bit by a spider, he has the love in high school, finds his first villain. It didn't follow those tropes. It does go through some of the similar motions, but it did it in a much different way that I thought was just unique. It was fun. It was just a different version of the story for the character, and I had a great time with it.
Yeah, this movie is definitely a fun movie, and it's well written, well acted. It's just a really well done movie, and yeah, it's not exactly. I wouldn't say it's an origin story, but it's very close to that. It's kind of like a sequel, but we didn't get the first movie, but they did it so well. And they just hinted at a few things, just the tiny little moments when, he's talking about being bit by the spider. And that's all we really need, because we have seen the origin of Spider-Man twice already in the past 10, 17 years or whatever. So we didn't need it again. And they did it really well to where we don't need that. And man, this movie just delivered. Yeah, Tom Holland, he was, I have to say, my favorite Peter Parker and Spider-Man combo. What did you think of the casting and acting in this movie?
I think the acting from top to bottom was pretty good. I think everybody served their role, and I would have to agree with you. Tom Holland was a fantastic Spider-Man. He was an excellent Peter Parker. He was just age appropriate. He fit the part. I enjoyed how the story took the character back to a much younger age, and he was the perfect person for that, because you can buy into his kind of being naive and just being kind of immature, and as he kind of grows and develops throughout the film. And I think really Tom Holland got to deliver all of those emotional dynamics very extremely well, and he had a great rapport with all the high school kids, and I also thought all the younger cast did a great job with all their performances. I think that they had some extremely realistic written dialogue. None of it felt overly scripted. They all landed their comedy and their lighthearted moments extremely well. Michael Keaton was fantastic. He kind of left me wanting more. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of his character kind of evolve. He kind of felt like he was going through the motions of the villain, but hey, with Michael Keaton in there performing those scenes, they were fantastic. fantastic. He has some, some of that just really intense delivery, like especially with the scene with Tom Holland inside the car before they go into the dance. It was just excellent. He delivered that well, and Robert Downey Jr. was his usual self. Jon Favreau also landed some comical moments in a very subtle way, and I think from top to bottom, everybody really served their role extremely well.
Yeah, Tom Holland being of age for Spider-Man was the best choice that they could have made. Yeah, Robert Downey Jr., he's not in it much, but when he is, he really commands the screen. And the interaction between Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. is really, it's sweet. It's kind of like the uncle and nephew, like kind of how Uncle Ben was to him, I assume, because we don't really know what Uncle Ben was in this universe, but he kind of took on that role. Yeah, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, he did a really good job at being threatening, and then when they reveal that twist of him being Liz's father, like that scene, my palms were sweating. I was like, they did it. They surprised me. And yeah, that car scene, that whole just where you can see that he's figuring it out slowly, and it was brilliantly acted, just brilliantly written, and that scene in particular, we'll get more into that later, but that was one of my top scenes. Yeah, everyone else was pretty darn good in this movie. I can't think of a bad performance. Maybe the teacher, he was a hit or miss. He was good in some parts and then just a little over the top, like he was trying too hard. Tony Revolori as Flash, he was pretty good, and something that I really admired about this movie is that they took the idea of him bullying Peter to throughout the entire movie. He's there pretty much the whole time, instead of just at the beginning, right, and then he disappears like in the other Spider-Man movies. And it's hard not to compare this Spider-Man movie, to the other ones because it's Spider-Man. So in terms of action, I thought this movie really delivered well on that front. It kind of just kept going with the action, and then it slowed down for more of the dramatic and just high school moments, and then it got right back into the action. And that's something that I really loved about this movie, as they didn't have to spend too much time developing the characters. They just jumped right in, and you're like, all right, let's do this. Anthony, what did you think of the action and special effects and stuff in this movie?
I really enjoyed it. Like you said, we didn't have to do that build up, so the story really starts out pretty quick. We get some of the reenactments of a different angle of some of the airport scene from the Avengers, which was really a great tie-in. And overall, I mean, the action was great. It felt like comic book action. I thought the web slinging and all his movements and his fight styles were all extremely well done. I love that scene in the Washington Monument when he's climbing up. It's like you were talking about sweaty palms earlier. It's like every time I see a movie like this, when the guy's up on the edge of something really high, it's like, I thought it was the depth of it was extremely well done. I thought just him leaping off over the top of the helicopter was excellent, and I really enjoyed the final climactic battle with the Vulture on the cargo plane. I thought that all the special effects were extremely well done. It was just very crisp and vivid, and I really enjoyed just all the action that had the Vulture in it. I thought the Vulture was extremely well designed, just from the look, how he enters the costume and comes out of it. I thought it was extremely well done, and just his overall movements and how he kind of goes about doing his stuff, I thought just led to some great action overall.
Yeah, I'd have to say the ferry scene might be one of my favorite scenes, simply because of all that really closed quarters web slinging where he's just flipping around and trying to pull it back together. That was pretty cool looking. But yeah, that final battle, what they did in this movie is they took Spider-Man to places that he had pretty much never been before, and they did that with the ferry because he'd never really spent that much time over water until the very first one with Tobey Maguire. Just kind of got flung into that abandoned building. But I mean, to have him where he can't actually go and swing off of buildings was risky, but they pulled it off really well. Um, Another thing with that Washington Monument, it was nice to see him outside of New York and that airport scene, and he's in a completely different city. But what I found interesting was they showed the depth or the height that he was at, and he was like freaked out, and he pretty much said that he had never been that high before, and I found that interesting because he's not like the typical Spider-Man that we had in the previous two versions, where he's just first day out, he's swinging from these skyscrapers. He's still a kid, you know. He's got fears, regular fears that normal kids would have, that I would have.
Exactly.
So I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I honestly can't remember a time where I thought or that I saw a scene and I was like, yeah, that's definitely CGI. You know, they made it look very realistic, and that had to do with the villain choice not being a totally CGI character, and they could actually just have him on like a wire harness and just hoist him up and do it real. And that's what I really liked about this movie, is the stunt work and just the realness of the movie. Something else I want to talk about is the Spider-Man suit. We already saw it in Captain America: Civil War, but we really get a better look at it in this movie, and we also get a good look at his Mark I suit. I really enjoyed seeing that version of the suit too. It wasn't as flashy, obviously, but it was still it was cool to see. What were your thoughts on the suits?
I completely agree with you on that one. I also liked his new suit. I really love it's almost like an Iron Man suit incorporated into a Spider-Man suit. I loved how they just played with all the different web shooting designs and styles that he had, and just the look of it, and all the the fins that come out when he needs to get some extra air if he's not around the skyscrapers and stuff. I really just loved it. I loved the kind of the incorporation of like a Jarvis style voice to it that kind of gives it that interaction, and another kind of a back and forth with Tom Holland to kind of bounce some of his, naiveness off. And I just thought the design and the concept of everything was very fun. It was unique. It was something we haven't seen in the movies before, and I had a great time.
Yeah, when me and my wife were watching that scene when he pretty much first discovers the computer voice, and later on when he gets locked in to the damage control facility, and he's coming up with the name for that computer voice. At first he said, I think it was Liz, and he's like, no, that's weird. And they're like, how about Karen? And that is my wife's name. So we just kind of looked over at each other like, no way, that's so funny. So I think that was probably one of her favorite parts.
I really enjoyed that scene too. I thought that later, one of the things that I enjoyed about this movie was the incorporation of the comedy, and I love that whole scene where he's locked in there overnight. I thought it was comical, it was realistic, and it really just added a little bit more time for him to kind of get to know his suit.
Yeah, and it was kind of like a training montage, but it didn't come off as a training montage. It just came off as just a fun scene where it's like, oh, he's trapped, and then he's like, how long have we been in here? It's like half an hour.
Right.
I really enjoyed that, just that whole scene. It was fun. In terms of other memorable scenes, what are some of the top scenes that you want to talk about?
I'd definitely say the favorite scene of this movie for me would be the whole Washington Monument scene. That whole sequence was fantastic. I liked a lot of the high school moments. It really builds the character. I kind of feel like this is a stepping stone to what we're going to, it's the foundation to what the character is going to grow to. I think this is going to be a very vital part of that story arc, and just to see him as a kid kind of interacting with all the students was just something that was very grounded and realistic, that it was in the other movies before, but I don't think it was really delivered as realistically as it was in this one. So I really enjoyed those. It was just something something different. And of course, any scene that had Michael Keaton in it was fantastic. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, that whole dynamic when you've seen Michael Keaton in a light as one light the whole entire movie, and then he goes up, shows up at Liz's house, and he's there as the father, and he's just completely delivering the charm and the charisma of that role perfectly. And it was a complete just change of pace, and this Tom Holland's reaction to it was excellent. And the scene in the car right before they drops him off to the dance, those were just the most memorable moments for me.
Yeah, that whole kitchen scene where he's got the knife and he's not like threatening him as, I know you're Peter Parker. It's kind of like a tease, like I'm the girl's father that you're taking to the dance.
Yeah.
And you see it as Peter Parker sees it, like this guy is the guy that you've been hunting. And wow, it was pulled off so well. One of the more memorable scenes for me was the interrogation scene with Donald Glover when Peter Parker, Spider-Man, pretty much activates the enhanced interrogation mode and his voice changes. I really enjoyed that part because it was supposed to be like going into it, you think it's going to be a really serious scene, and it just comes off as more humorous, but it works so well. And it kind of was a poke at the Dark Knight movies, where he's got that voice changer in the new ones, and he physically changed his own voice in the Christopher Nolan ones. And I really enjoyed that kind of poking fun at DC. What did you think of that scene, or any other scenes that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene. It was comical. I just really enjoyed overall how the comedy was worked into this movie extremely well. It was from start to finish, but when it was emotional, it was emotional. When it was impactful, it was impactful. The action kicked when it needed to, but throughout all that, it just wove the comedy in extremely well, and just different dynamics of comedy, different levels of it, and I just had a great time from watching it.
Yeah, you mentioned the emotional parts. That scene after he gets buried by all that rubble, after the building pretty much comes down on him, I thought that was a really powerful scene. When he's pinned and he's screaming, and like I got some like shivers down my spine. I'm like, wow, he's delivering this scene just flawlessly, and my heart went out to him, because it's like, this is just a kid, and he's like buried under this rubble. Like they did such a good job with that scene in particular for me. Just the one negative I have about that scene was when he looks at his mask and you see his reflection in the water. The angle was off, but it's a tiny negative. It's such a great scene, and man, just what happened after that scene too is just wow.
Yeah.
So moving on, guys, this movie has quite a few like Easter eggs and cameos. Now, I didn't go through and like find them all, but there were definitely some that were pretty in your face. They hint back at like Avengers: Age of Ultron. There's like a Ultron. They mention him. There's a head that you see. All the Captain America stuff was that was just so fun. That in particular, the gym scene where the teacher's standing on the wrong side of the TV, and the Captain America's like, "And your gym teacher," and he's standing over here, and I don't know why that part just made me giggle, because it was so typical, but it worked so good. And one thing that just keeps coming up with me with these movies, in particular the Marvel movies, is that the humor is usually one of the most realistic moments in the movies. And that's what makes it funny, because these movies are just they're big and they're cool, but when it comes down to reality, it's like, that's funny. And Marvel's they just knock it out of the park with these movies time and time again. What are some cameos or things that you can remember about this movie, Anthony?
Like you said, the Captain America stuff was fantastic. I like the post credit scene with Captain America after the movie was over. I really like Donald Glover in this movie, just like you were talking earlier. That whole garage scene with when he's got his hand webbed to the trunk, that back and forth was great. His little scene of comedy was extremely well done. I like Tom Hardy in this movie. He's supposed to be Venom, so I'm not really sure what they're gonna do with this. I mean, Michael Keaton has a great moment when he blasts him away and he disintegrates him, and he thinks it was the anti-gravity gun, and it wasn't. So he was like really in the movie. He had some routine scenes, and I was curious about how he was what his character might be teasing to, because he's gonna be Venom, of course, in a later movie. So that was a great cameo, and I really liked Zendaya's performance as Michelle. She ends up kind of alluding to the fact that she likes to be called MJ. So I thought she had some good comical moments as kind of like that outsider. She reminded me of Ali Sheedy from The Breakfast Club a little bit, with her just kind of outcast personality. And I liked all the cameo performances. I thought everybody really hit.
Yeah, the MJ reveal at the end of the movie, I can't say that I was too surprised by it, because when they said her name, Michelle, and the other girl's name was Liz, as soon as I heard both their names, I'm like, okay, is MJ ever going to come in this movie? I'm like, wait, they might actually change MJ's name to Michelle, but I kind of forgot about it until then they revealed it. I'm like, oh yeah, that is her, okay. And I actually enjoy the fact that they're changing the name. I mean, that might be like a name that she goes by or something, I don't know. But I like the fact that they're bringing back MJ. And the friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon, I thought he was really fun. He was, what they call him is the man in the chair. And he actually, like, as a character, he's enjoying that side of the Spider-Man involvement with crime and the Avengers. And he was a good addition to the movie. And I liked the fact that, he was more fun than Harry Osborn ever was in the other movies. Yeah. And, at least not yet, he doesn't want to kill Spider-Man. I've heard some rumors that he might be a future Spider-Man villain, but, we'll have to wait and see for that.
Yeah.
So again, guys, this movie is thoroughly enjoyable. I honestly think it might be one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, if not my all-time favorite Spider-Man movie. I have to see it a couple more times to really be able to, rank it in terms of all the other Spider-Man movies. But, man, Marvel, again, just keeps knocking it out of the park. And they, as always, they include post-credit scenes. And there's a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. The mid-credit scene is with Michael Keaton, and he's confronted by this guy in prison. He's like, hey, there's a rumor going around about who Spider-Man is. And if you look closely, there's a scorpion tattoo on his neck. And, rumor is that, he's going to become later on the Scorpion, which is a villain in the Spider-Man universe. So that's cool. But what I really enjoyed about that scene is Michael Keaton's character, is still protecting him. He kind of accepts defeat, and he's like, you know what? No, you're not gonna know. I'm not gonna tell you. And I appreciated that. And the post-credit scene with Captain America coming on the screen, and you think it's gonna be this cool scene, and basically he's like talking to you as the audience, like, you guys have a lot of patience to sit and wait for this. And I mean, he's not talking directly to the audience, but you feel like it. And at the end of it, he turns to the side and he says, how many more of these do we have to do? And I see that as twofold. One, yes, it was the character being like, how many more of these videos do we have to do? But it was also like a poke at all the Marvel movies, being like, okay, Chris Evans saying, how many more movies or how many times do I have to reprise this role? And I really enjoyed just the fun aspect of all these post-credit scenes and just the movies overall. And this movie is definitely a shining moment in whatever phase they're in. leading up to Avengers Infinity War. And Tom Holland, I think he's just going to be so great as Spider-Man in the next Avengers movie. And I'm pretty sure they're going to carry him on into more Avengers movies, because I think they have at least another one planned, a fourth one. And obviously they have more Spider-Man movies planned, because why not? I mean, Spider-Man, of course they're going to make more. But overall, guys, yeah, this movie is just thoroughly enjoyable. I give it an A. There are only just a tiny few things that it could have done better, but man, this movie is phenomenal. Anthony, what are your final thoughts and grade on this movie?
I also really enjoyed it. I loved the inclusion of Robert Downey Jr. in this movie. He was in it just enough, but he wasn't in it too much. It felt like Spider-Man's movie. I like the lighthearted tone of it, because I have a feeling that they could end up alluding to maybe some darker tones later as he kind of grows into this character more. I enjoyed this, early high school look at the character, because of course Tom Holland's going to get older as the years pass, so he's going to continue to grow and evolve that character. And I really enjoyed this little step in the story arc of his. And, I like the fact that, the Vulture could still come back to, fight him again once, you never know. He's in prison right now, and we've seen plenty of times they can easily get out of prison. So, yeah, I just really enjoyed it overall. I like the cameos. I like the comedy. It was just fun. It was, a very familiar character, but was just a different style of movie. It was just, I really enjoyed it. It really surprised me, because you could see the ambition in it. I mean, when you go back and you look at, like, The Amazing Spider-Man, it was fun, but it wasn't that much of a different movie than the first Spider-Man from 2002 was. And this one was just a completely different movie. You can tell it's got Marvel's imprint on it. They wove it into the MCU just enough to kind of seam it in there real tight, but it still stands on its own in its own little world there. And overall, I have to give it a 90%. I was enjoyed by it.
So guys, that is our spoiler review for Spider-Man Homecoming. I enjoyed having Anthony from SilverScreen Analysis to talk about this movie. It was a lot of fun. Anthony, go ahead and tell us where we can find you at.
Hey, you can find me on YouTube, SilverScreen Analysis, tons of movie reviews over there. You can find me on Twitter at YourCinemaGuy. Mike, thanks again for having me. I had a great time talking about these three movies with you. It ramped up, we got to see Spider-Man 2002. We reviewed that one, The Amazing Spider-Man, and then we were really anticipating Tom Holland and what he could do with this character, and he delivered. I had a great time talking about these movies with you.
Yeah, guys, it was a lot of fun having Anthony here to talk about this movie and Spider-Man from 2002 and The Amazing Spider-Man. You can check those videos out. I'll put the links down in the description. But what did you guys think of this movie? Did you like it, love it, or hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a big old thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button so you can be notified of when we upload new content. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.